Hi, and welcome to the Debrief. This is Carolina Journal's weekly recap of everything happening in public policy and politics right here in the capital city of Raleigh. We really are bringing it to news from across the state each week at carolinajournal.com. I'm Donna King. I'm editor-in-chief of Carolina Journal. Our crew is here today, but joining us, Bob Lutke, director of the Center for Effective Education at the John Locke Foundation. We're really going to be talking a little bit about funding for education today and some of the things that we're seeing happening post-COVID. Also here this week on the Debrief, Teresa Opeka, who is our reporter who covers the executive branch for Carolina Journal, and Brianna Kramer, who covers the state legislature, letting you know everything that's going on with your representatives here in Raleigh. All right, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. Let's kick it off actually with Brianna, if you don't mind. Give us an update on what's happening in the General Assembly. Seems like things are moving really fast.
Yeah, there's a lot happening this week down at the General Assembly. We've got the ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement Bill. That's moving forward, House Bill 10. So it's passed both chambers, the House and Senate, but they have a couple modifications that they want to make in the language before they officially approve it and send it to the governor. So this bill is really going to require all sheriffs across North Carolina to comply with an ICE detainer whenever the federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement issues a detainer, requesting that they hold a criminal in jail for up to 48 hours longer so that ICE can come in and take that individual who is not a citizen, a non-citizen who committed a crime. So that is moving forward in the General Assembly, and it looks like next week we should see final action on that. But it's also expected to, not be supported by the governor.
Well, actually, that's a question for you, Teresa. What's the background on this? This isn't the first time we've seen it come up.
No. It got stalled out before, and I think I've been doing some stories. Brianna obviously has picked up the gauntlet there. Most sheriffs want to agree with this, but there are a few that stand out, like over in Mecklenburg County. The sheriff there, he refuses to comply with that. There's a few others too.
And so, the governor's vetoed it before.
And he's vetoed before, but now we have a supermajority, so it's obviously bound to be overridden if he does veto it.
Are you sensing that there may be the votes to override a veto?
I think so, yes. They are moving forward on it pretty quickly, and the representatives sponsoring it with the senators are just making final adjustments. They did add in the Senate one amendment to it that allows any person to file a complaint with the Attorney General if a sheriff doesn't comply with the new
law. All right. Well, with Josh Stein running for governor, I mean, that would really put him on the hot seat.
Absolutely, for him. And then Dan Bishop, who's also running for the Republican side, I think he's the one who led on to encouraging this to also be added to the bill.
Very interesting. All right, what else are you watching going through the state legislature?
Yeah, we've got House Bill 237, so masks banning in public. It's called Unmasking Mobs and Criminals. So they've been pushing this
one very fast.
I
love the names that they give these.
I know, right?
Unmasking Mobs and Criminals.
Yes. So it kind of comes as the pro-Palestinian, protests. Aggressive protests have been taking place here in North Carolina. They've given other examples, whether that's the Proud Boys or Antifa, just crowds masking to hide their identity in public so that they can possibly commit crimes and be unlawful. So it's just to prevent that. So it used to be in place actually here in North Carolina, and then during COVID, they altered that rule for obviously health reasons so that everybody could of course wear a mask in public without any issues. But now they are wanting to repeal that and take away that excuse or that exemption, I should say. So they're working on that, and there's a little bit of debate, or a lot actually, among Democrats on the language and what this could cause.
All right, tell me, what are they saying?
For health reasons. So, they give the example if Granny goes to Walmart and wears a mask for her health, or if she's got a sickness, what is going to happen? And so Democrats are very concerned, and we're trying to make amendments to it yesterday on the Senate floor, but none of them passed. And Republicans say, well, this is just common sense, and you're not going to prosecute somebody for a health reason.
Okay.
But they are, at the end of the day, taking out that health exemption.
Sure. So it would be up to the individual police officer, maybe a district attorney. We're still trying to find out some of those details.
Yeah, technically, I think they would be taking out that exemption for health.
Okay.
So possibly so.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to fight
Sure.
and debate right now. But yeah, we're trying to get some legal
Right.
clarification on that to see if that would really have an effect and,
Sure.
and allow law enforcement or district attorneys to possibly prosecute somebody who's just wearing a mask,
Right.
or if it's just for criminals.
What about other exemptions? Are they in the bill besides
Yes.
health? Okay.
Yeah, like for Halloween or religious reasons,
Sure.
there's a variety of exemptions that are
Okay.
in the bill, but
Yeah.
the health one is going to go away.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, anything else you're watching down at the General Assembly?
Yeah, there's actually a House Joint Resolution
Okay.
that we think is going to have some action in the next couple weeks here. It's a resolution calling for a convention of states.
Okay.
So activists were down at the state legislature yesterday.
Got to get your picture with the llama, right?
Yeah, Liberty Llama was down there. Yeah, very popular, by the way.
Yeah.
Lots of people stopping by to take pictures. The guy actually made me take a picture with
Did
the
you?
llama,
Oh,
too.
you're going to have to give that to us. All right, yeah.
I know. Very, very fun. So they were down there advocating for using Article 5 of the
Okay.
Constitution to call for a convention of states.
How many states have passed so far?
19.
Okay.
19 state legislatures have agreed to call for a convention. So
Okay.
North
33 or something? How many are needed?
34.
34.
Yeah.
Okay.
So North Carolina could be the 20th. The House actually passed it last year. So
Okay.
they only have this session, I believe, to get it passed
Okay.
in the Senate.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So if a state passed it, say, years ago, does it expire depending on, or does it just depend on what the state passed?
Well, so it depends if it made it through both chambers.
Okay.
So actually, in North Carolina, back in 2017, the Senate did pass it.
Okay. Oh,
But
interesting.
it's expired since then because the House didn't.
Right,
So now
right.
we have it where the House did pass it. Now.
Okay.
they're
Well,
hoping-
explain real quick what that means. What is a convention of states?
So it's basically calling for all the states to gather to propose amendments
Okay.
to the Constitution. And so the Convention of States Action Group is trying to impose term limits and fiscal restraints and limits to the federal government's size
Okay.
and jurisdiction. So
Okay. Outside of normal congressional Capitol Hill sessions.
yeah, so you can propose amendments to the Constitution in two ways. So Congress can do that whenever they want,
Okay.
and then the states also have a way to do it themselves. So it's a long process, but they're trying to make it happen to kind of rein in on the federal government a little bit.
Very interesting. All right, I know you'll be following that closely for us. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. All right, so if we can just switch gears for just a second and talk about some education spending. We're going to be talking a lot this legislative session about tweaks to the budget, right? Because that's what our short session does here in North Carolina. One of those things is Opportunity Scholarship, long waiting list, about what, $250-ish million it would cost to clear it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Senate approved on May 2nd
Okay.
legislation to eliminate the waiting list. That was about $467 million, but that was more than just eliminating the
Okay.
eliminating the waiting list was about $215 million. But then they also replenished about $248 million inside the fund reserve.
Sure.
And there was also another almost $25 million to eliminate the wait list for the special needs ESA.
Okay.
So there were a number of provisions in there, all addressing, backlogs essentially.
Right, of course.
So as I said, the Senate approved that May 2nd.
Okay.
But we were hoping that the House would pick it up quickly, but they haven't.
Okay.
And I now believe that they're going to tie that to the budget bill.
Okay.
Because they believe that it impacts the budget significantly.
Okay.
And that's bad news
Okay.
for parents, schools, and I think lawmakers.
Okay. Why is that?
well-
why would that be bad doing it now versus the budget, doing it at the end of the session?
No, at the end of the session, the reason why it should be done now is because parents are making decisions
Oh,
on schools
of course, yeah.
for next year now.
Yeah, where are we going in August?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. Parents need clarity.
Sure.
Will they have money from?
Sure.
Will they be a recipient? Schools need to know who's leaving, who's coming.
Right.
All that's going to be a fog now till minimally mid-July.
Right,
at
right.
earliest. So there's going to be a lot of frustration.
Yeah.
If the House indeed does wait this long.
Okay.
Plus, I think politically, it's not a good move because both the House and Senate, this was in the budget bill last year, and they overrode the governor's veto, but they both voted thumbs up on expanding this, the Opportunity Scholarship Bill. And right now, this is to eliminate, the backlog. So parents think right now they're kind of getting jacked around. By the legislature, they said the money was going to be there. Now the money's not there when the decision needs to be made. So parents are frustrated. Schools are frustrated, and we're 6 months out from an election. So I don't think that's good. So I'm hoping, pressure is going to be brought by, I'm sure, parents, schools, school choice groups, all hoping that the House deals with this expeditiously. And likely vetoed by Governor Cooper.
So they have to build in some time to
That's
override it.
That's right. And then hopefully the votes will still be there for the overrides.
Oh, interesting. All right. So let's just say they don't get to it till, say, end of July. You're going to have all these parents suddenly finding out that they've got some opportunity scholarship money trying to get into schools that may not have space for them.
Yeah, practically speaking, that's kind of untrod territory.
Yeah,
because all of the way the program's currently set up, all those decisions are made in March. And I don't think the fall scholarship distribution would even be an option. Just because of the logistics of it. So I think that's why it's paramount now that people have clarity on if the money's going to be there, if space is going to be there, and even from the school's perspective, the comings and goings are really important for schools to plan.
Yeah, of course. So, I guess if you don't have kids in that age group and you don't run a school, you're not cognizant of that deadline the way maybe the rest of us might be. I do want to ask you about this. One of the things that we've been talking about a lot is this COVID money. Everybody run back in time a little bit. Of course, when COVID happened and the federal government just opened the coffers, there's money pouring into every industry, every group, every school system to try and help this recovery from all the government imposed shutdowns. I remember thinking at the time, I think you and I even talked about this, what do we do when that money runs out? Because it's going to happen. I mean, it's not going to just go.
It's actually going to run out.
Right? I mean, it runs out.
So
unless you just keep the coffers open indefinitely, we're hitting that point now, aren't we, with schools?
Yeah. Let's back up a little bit and talk about the numbers involved.
Sure.
North Carolina received about $6 billion.
Billion dollars.
K-12.
For K-12.
Oh, 21, 22, 23.
Okay,
those were distributed in 3 different bills. The most recent one, ARPA, which gave North Carolina about $3.6 billion. Okay. Of that $6 billion, I just looked at this before I came in here. About half of it was spent on salaries and benefits. That's about $3 billion.
Wow.
Now, where did that go to?
Teacher
salaries, bonuses. A lot of bonuses given to bring teachers in, retain teachers during times like this. Some training. A lot of computers were bought. Chromebooks. In fact, schools are pretty worried about that now. Because those have a shelf life of about 2-3 years. They don't have federal money to replace them. There's a bill actually working its way through now to have at least provide some money to replace Chromebooks.
Federal bill?
A state bill.
A state bill.
Because there is no additional federal.
So you had all those kids in suddenly an online school and then nothing to work with.
That's right.
My daughter was that age at the time, and they wouldn't let them use home computers. They had to use a Chromebook.
That's right.
Even if they had a computer at home, they weren't allowed to use it. They had to use the state-issued Chromebook.
Yeah, and they have a shelf life of about 2-3 years. And so we're on that right now.
So what do we do now?
Well, they're asking for more money for that. But the other implication is obviously for school districts, because you've heard the term federal cliff. Because right now, the last 2-3 years have been aberrational for federal spending. In an average year, it's about 5% of total revenue. The last 3 years, it's been about 11%.
Wow.
So it's been highly elevated to what it normally is. It's going to stop, so there's going to be a drop-off in federal funds. Okay, so what happens budgetarily, you see these programs in place, staffing is still in place, but you're going to have far less money from the federal government. So that differential will force school districts to either find revenue to fund staff or programs from another program, or eliminate staff or programs.
Sure.
Those are one or two choices. Now, there are a number of districts around North Carolina that have had, significant staffing issues as they've worked their way through the budget process. And the budget process, we're kind of deep right into it now. In spring, schools put their budgets together, then they finalize them, then they go to the county commission to basically ask for the local component. But, schools like Durham, New Hanover's had, at least out in the press, there's been layoffs, possibly up to 200.
Wow.
I don't know if that's been finalized or not, but depending upon how districts handle their federal money, if they put it in bonuses versus, giving raises, which would, obviously mean that the local districts then are responsible for a higher component of, individual pay. So districts have done that in various ways. Some have done better than others as far as navigating all of COVID and, the challenges with it. So we'll see probably in a few weeks.
Well, here's the question, though. All this money was supposed to bring kids up to speed, help them recover from a year and a half, 18 months or whatever in remote. Did it work?
If you ask me, no.
Really?
It didn't.
Okay.
I've beat a drum on one thing throughout this whole period. And there's few times where research really coalesces around one option for a challenge. And the best thing that the research has shown the best option for addressing learning loss is individualized tutoring.
Tutoring, yeah.
Now, a lot of schools, for whatever reason, have not gone very intensively into that area. If you look at actually the expenditures, it's only like 1%.
1% went into tutoring?
1%. If you look at the actual expenditure,
okay,
about 1%.
Where did it go?
All over the place. Like I said, half of it salary and benefits. Salary
and benefits for like remedial education, or just to supplement what was already there?
Well, a lot of different things. But there are actually two lines in the expenditure report which schools have to fill out each month on how they're spending COVID money.
Okay.
There's two lines that refer specifically to tutoring. And I looked at it this morning, and it's 1%. It's $60 million. Which is about 1% of $6 billion.
Wow.
So not enough was spent on it. Now they'll say, well, they worked on other things. It's not. They've shortchanged it, and if you look at the data now, the state report. There's an annual state report that comes out. Trend lines are going in the right direction, but the overall
academic trend lines.
Yes, the overall learning. Is still less than what it was pre-COVID.
Right, and
that's the important thing. Is there's still a lot of room to improve.
Sure, and they're not the same kids. That's kind of the thing. They're aging through the system.
That's right.
So you're not judging Jimmy in 9th grade over 3 different years. He's moving through the system, and now he's in theory maybe a college freshman. When this happened in the 10th grade, hopefully.
Yeah.
But it's hard to predict what happens to these kids. And do you think that this is part of the impetus for this increasing move toward like school choice and homeschooling and all these other things?
Very much so. COVID did in 2 years what the school choice movement couldn't do in 20.
Wow.
And that's people were not satisfied with what was going on in their child's classrooms.
Sure.
And that just really made a lot of parents intensively look for other educational options.
Right.
And they told their legislators, and they responded.
Sure.
So we've got more educational options, and I think that's a good thing. Now it's just navigating and making sure that the options that are there are provided well and people benefit from them.
Sure. But you can't get around that the majority of kids are probably always going to be in traditional public schools. Yeah. So how do we really examine funding for that model so that the majority of kids are still successful even if their families don't want to take them out of school?
Yeah, first let me say that I totally disagree with the narrative that's brought out there.
Okay.
That choice, it's a zero-sum game, and if you're expanding choice, you're taking away from the public schools.
Right.
We can do both.
Yeah, sure.
We have been doing both, And anyone who's saying that, we're damaging the public schools, it's just simply not true.
Right.
Right now, school choice, the percentage of choice options the total money spent on choice, private school choice in North Carolina, relative to K-12 expenditures is about 2%.
2%. But if you look at opportunity scholarships, that's not out of the education budget. Is that correct?
Correct.
Because I hope I understand it correctly. As I
Correct.
hear this, it's taking away from education.
Correct.
Different
It's a
budget.
different budget
Okay.
entirely. It's not
Okay.
coming out of K-12.
Okay.
Now, it impacts things.
Okay.
It impacts. I'm not going to say that it doesn't.
Well, it's part of the
impact
overall budget.
Yeah, but those challenges and those changes, they can be managed. They can
Sure.
be managed.
Sure. Now, how do we manage it? How do we make sure that this what appears to be an antiquated funding system for public education, where most kids probably are still going to remain in traditional public schools? How do we fix that? That seems to be the issue.
Well, I think first of all, the whole system needs to be overhauled.
Okay.
Because the current system, the guts of it was created primarily in 1931.
1931.
1931, it was the
Century.
Mechanics Act.
A century ago.
Which basically said, the state will pay instructional expenditures.
Okay.
Everyday everyday instructional expenditures, and local counties would be responsible for capital costs.
Okay.
That agreement was made basically so the state could provide a floor of
Right.
quality during the Depression for
Sure.
school districts.
Sure.
That's been in place. Now, what's been added to that is about 50 different funding formulas to take to respond to varying needs over the last 6-7 decades.
Century. I mean, we're
So,
31.
Yeah. Yeah. Now,
Forget
does it
was.
work?
90 years.
We've had a couple of evaluations of it that says no.
Right.
It's not transparent. We don't know if it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's hard to really show that it's accountable.
Sure.
And people on both sides of the aisle have said, yeah, we got to do something. We had a report that came out in about 2010 that said, yeah, it's time to do something. Then the recession hit, and
Sure.
the report got put on a shelf. In 2017, there was a Governor's Commission on School Finance, which, it said similar things. And, there was more sentiment back then to move towards a system where the money is tied to the student, which I think
Right.
is where the majority of the
Backpack
sentiment
funding.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you provide a base floor of funding per student, and then you add based on school district characteristics and the characteristics of the student, like if he's special needs, if he's at risk, et cetera. You
Sure.
provide a certain amount per characteristic.
That's a huge change.
Yeah, it's a huge change, but North Carolina is really kind of in the minority on this.
Really?
In that, yeah, they have what's called a resource allocation model, and you're really kind of funding programs versus the student.
Okay.
And it has more, it takes care, that type of model really takes care of answering the major criticism of the current system, which is it's not transparent.
Right.
It's not accountable.
Right.
It's too complicated, and we don't know if the money's getting to where it really needs to be.
Sure. Is it realistic to think we can make that big a change? Would you have to phase it in? How does that work?
Well, states have done it, but it's also the biggest political lift in the state.
Sure.
Because K-12 funding is the largest budget expenditure.
The
So
largest.
there's going to have to be trade-offs. Hold harmless provisions are often a carrot that people put out there to make sure
Right.
that districts don't lose
Yeah.
in the interim, and there are ways that can be done.
Right.
I think the sense is that something needs to be done. It's just putting something out that people can look at and say, yeah, this is better than what we currently have. I think it's possible.
Great. All right. Well, that's encouraging. I appreciate
So,
it.
thank
wow.
you.
Wow. Very interesting. The what are you hearing? I know I'm not going to ask you to get into education policy. That Bob clearly has a lot of expertise. Do you think that there's a movement among lawmakers, among legislators, to really look at the education budget? Because Opportunity Scholarship, clearing that is still moving through there.
Yeah, I definitely think there is a chance.
Okay.
I know there's some interest in
Sure.
totally funding that. And I know that a recent Carolina Journal poll also shows that a third of likely voters want to see money go to the Opportunity Scholarship taken away from NC Innovation.
Right.
So the voters want it, and I think that the representatives, most of them, or a good chunk of them, want to make that happen this session too.
So there is an appetite for that. All right, so November 2024 election coming up. That's a lot of this will really depend on who wins, who lands in these key spots like state auditor and things like that. Give us an update on what we saw from Tuesday.
Sure. So overall numbers, we've talked about second primaries and runoff elections not having a great turnout. This was no exception.
Okay.
There was a little over 133,000 out of 4.8 million ballots cast, or translate that to 2.76%.
Oh, wow.
So
that is not a great turnout.
And I think you were mentioning about the numbers like for during election day.
Oh, right. So early voting was like 37-ish thousand out of 7 million. And we ended up with 133,000.
Right.
So we got almost 100,000 people showing up there on election day.
Right.
Might be because it's a Republican runoff. I mean, there may have been more if there was more Democrat.
True. Yeah. And we talked about that. Tuesday was a rainy day across the whole state. It was miserable.
You were saying that you thought that was
so,
a big part.
I hate to say it, but
that's a good thing. No, and it does affect it. I heard too on the radio this morning, a lot of people didn't know about the second primary. They claimed they didn't hear about it, didn't get anything in the mail. I don't know, it's with the county or it's the state election board, but a lot of people were saying on the radio this morning, nope, I didn't even know about it. So
all right, so what's the results?
So a lot of different factors. So we had two statewide races. We had Hal Weatherman running against Jim O'Neill for lieutenant governor, the Republican nomination. Weatherman came out with 74% to O'Neill's 26%.
Wow, significant, yeah.
Yeah, and also for state auditor Dave Bolick, he got 53% to Jack Clark's 47%. And as we know, Kelly Daughtry dropped out of CD13. So Brad Knott did come away as the winner in that race as well.
He did. So something like 80-90% of the vote there for Brad Knott. But that kind of really locks in his election to Congress, because that is a heavily Republican district there around Johnson County.
Right. That's what they were saying. And then he's supposed to go up against Frank Pierce, the Democrat candidate. But you're right. It's a heavily Republican-dominated area.
Okay. All right. Good. So you had a chance to interview these candidates. You feel like they're ready to hit the ground running, because next stop is general election.
Right. I definitely think so. Speaking of hitting the ground running, Hal Weatherman, who's traveled all 100 counties, and like he said, that did make a difference, I believe, for him. Going out there, getting his, just coming face to face with people, talking with people, hearing what their concerns are. He's even visited them multiple times, some of the counties.
Right.
So I think he is ready. Dave Bolick, he's ready. Jack Clark pointed out he is a CPA, and he was a CPA and had the auditing experience, but Dave Bolick sits on the UNC Chapel Hill Board of Trustees. He's found a $100 million structural deficit. He created an audit board.
He's well connected in this
He's
circle.
well connected. Yeah. He's had other businesses where he knows the financials. So he's got that experience. He may not be a CPA per se, but he does have the experience behind him. Hal Weatherman, he's with Dan Forrest's campaign, Sue Myrick. He's got that background. Again, he's well connected too. Went to his watch party Tuesday night, and a reporter talked with him as well as me afterward. So he said, "Well, your opponent, Rachel Hunt, who is on the Democratic side, is talking about abortion, and she actually did file legislation to protect abortion in the state constitution on Wednesday. What do you have to say?" He says, I talk about any issue, all she's going to talk about is abortion. And he said, people, it's important, but people have other worries, concerns. They're worrying how they're going to put gas in their car, how they're going to buy food. That's what's most important. He said, right now our state also is not ready for anything that would happen, like maybe a terrorist attack, or we had the rolling blackouts. He mentioned that before, the Chinese spy balloon, all of that. He says, we're just told to sit back and just, not do anything about it. He says we need to be prepared, and he seems to be ready and able. Yeah.
Interesting. Sarah, I'm going to get you to take your education hat off for just a second. We got Rachel Hunt, the daughter of former Governor Jim Hunt, and Hal Weatherman, who's been involved with Lieutenant Governor's campaign, Sue Myrick. It's been a pretty strong fixture in the Republican Party for quite a while. These are kind of some heavyweight candidates in this race. What do you think?
Yeah, I think name recognition won't be a problem.
Right, no, that will not be a problem.
And they offered, strong contrasts.
Sure.
I think Hal, having been Dan Forrest's chief of staff, knows the ins and outs of that office. Obviously, Rachel and her father, well known across North Carolina, so she knows what's involved with, offices across North Carolina.
Right.
So I think it'll be a good race.
Yeah.
They both are seasoned politicians, and I think it may be determined by mistakes.
Right.
know,
that's a really good point.
So I'm looking forward to it, actually.
Yeah.
So I mean, I see. Teresa had said that Hal had gone across the state. I think when Dan ran, I think that was the thing that put him over the top, and he knows the importance.
Makes a difference.
It does make a difference.
He knows the importance of face-to-face contact.
Very interesting.
So
Yeah.
All right. Well, good.
Yeah,
tell me
and
what else.
one other thing too, Dave Bolick mentioned in the interview with me, he called the current auditor, Jessica Holmes, who was appointed by Governor Cooper when Beth Wood
Democrat,
resigned.
of course.
Democrat, when she resigned, Beth Wood resigned in December, called her the disappearing auditor, because you don't hear a lot from her, although there was one report earlier this week about some findings. But he said he was disappointed she didn't look into the Durham school district because they had a payroll error.
Yeah, they've had some big problems.
Where they had employees being overpaid from July to December of 2023.
Sure.
He says that's one thing that should be looked at.
Okay.
Also, too, he said on day one he would like to actually audit possibly the DMV.
Oh, yeah.
Which a lot of people are complaining about getting
interesting.
appointments.
Sure.
And also the state and county election boards.
Very
He said that hasn't been done in a long time.
Interesting. So he would really have a different philosophy as state auditor, being more of a watchdog. Do you think that would, he's got a lot of legislative support for doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would help.
Yeah.
I've been covering the DMV and know there's a lot of issues, so that would be very helpful if they could kind of sort out the issues and the tech issues that they're having, and what is the issue? Is it staffing, or do we need to update their systems and technology? So that would be really helpful.
All right, we've got a long road to November, and we'll be covering it a lot. Thanks so much for joining us on the Debrief. I appreciate all your time and being right here with us. Make sure you check out carolinajournal.com. We'll have more on all these stories, lots of analysis, everything going on. So join us back here every Thursday, and we'll have more.